Oh, the customer has made a choice. We will only be resealing the rear timing cover. We won't be replacing the chains and the camshaft sprockets because that will be too much money. What I've done so far, I've cleaned all the silicone. I've tried my best to clean the front off as much as possible. Yes, I won't be replacing any of this, even though it is the original water pump. This is all clean. This is all clean, ready for the new camshaft. As you saw, that one was damaged. This one's clean, all the covers are clean. So now we will begin removing the subframe first. We've got drive shaft as a cover, some wiring on the other side, and then we'll be removing the gearbox and we'll be resealing this rear timing cover because it's leaking from the bottom. Frame is off, and now we have some coolant pipes that need to be disconnected. We have the oil cooler behind there. We've got the bolts for the flywheel. On the other side we need to disconnect the starter motor, this coolant line. So let's get to it. Here I'm taking off the inlet manifold. As you can see, it's pretty dirty. You'll see the inlet valves in a second as well. They're also pretty carboned up, but later on we'll be doing some walnut blasting to clean everything and get it looking fresh. The back of the engine block is now clean from all the silicone, all the oil, and now we can move on to the carbon cleaning. So the valves do look pretty bad. They are pretty carboned up. The process to clean the valves is pretty straightforward. I'll just sit here for 2 hours and blast walnuts at the valves. Pretty boring, so I didn't really include any footage of cleaning except that little short clip. But the finished product is really good, so it's definitely worth doing whilst the engine is out, because the only way to clean the valves is to remove the engine. New camshaft has been acquired. Now I can start removing the oil control rings off the old camshaft, being very careful not to damage the little plastic rings, and that old camshaft can go in the bin. I used some Permatex assembly lube to make sure that when the engine is spinning over for the first time, before it builds up all pressure, there's not any unwanted wear on the camshafts. The old rocker arms have been removed, and now you can see the difference between the new and old. The needle bearings inside the new ones are a lot bigger, so hopefully the bearings don't fall out of them. This is what actually causes all the damage. The needles fall out of them, and how the camshaft is spinning. It's not rolling on the rocker arm, it's basically just hitting it, it's tapping it, and that's what causes the damage on the camshaft. When you're fitting the camshaft carrier, you've got to be very careful. You've got to make sure you fit it properly, because where the vacuum pump goes in, it needs to be a perfect circle so that it will go in nicely and there won't be any oil leaks. So what I do before I tighten all the bolt, I put the rear timing cover on, I also put the vacuum pump in, and whilst I'm tightening the bolts, I wiggle the vacuum pump backwards and forwards just to make sure it doesn't get bound up. Bank 2 is a lot easier to align because you've got a place at the top and a place at the bottom where you can put drill bits in, and that basically acts as dowel pins, and that helps align the camshaft carrier properly on the cylinder head. So now that the camshaft carriers are fitted, I can start putting in the timing chain guides and chains. If I'm being honest, it felt a little bit weird putting old timing chain guides on, but that's what the customer wanted, and they weren't broken or anything, so they should be fine. When I was refitting the guides, I put a little bit of that Permatex assembly lube so that when the engine is cranking over for the first time, there won't be any scoring put on the guides. Now I can fit the locking plate for the camshafts. Bank 2 is a little bit fiddly because you need to balance the exhaust camshafts on the valves, and then once that's in the position you can take the locking plate off, you can put the tool back together, and then you can put the tool in properly and lock the camshafts. Bank 1's a lot easier to lock the camshafts because as long as you put the camshafts in the position before you put the carrier on, the camshafts stay in place, they don't move, so you can fit the tool quite easily. When you fit in the camshaft adjusters, you do need to be careful because they're not fully round, they're more of like an egg shape. So basically there's a notch in between two teeth, and that needs to correspond with the two cutouts on the camshaft carrier. To tighten the bolts for the camshaft adjusters, you need two people because someone needs to be holding the camshaft adjuster with a special tool whilst the other person is tightening them. They get torqued to 35 Newton meters and then 35 degrees. So now that everything is on, I can spin the engine a couple times and make sure that I've set up the timing correctly. After spinning the engine a couple times, I can go around and check all of the timing marks. So bank 2, you can't really get the locking plate back in because there needs to be oil pressure in the oil tensioner. But bank 1 you can put straight in, and now you can see a lot closer the timing positions on the adjusters that I was talking about. But with the timing out the way, I can start putting everything back together. So at this point I did skip over the reassembly of the gearbox and the subframe because that stuff is pretty boring, and this video has turned out a lot longer than what I anticipated it to be. So I've skipped straight to reassembling all the ancillaries.
Show us.
What the hell? See?
I'm very sorry that we went This just feels like whenever it's recorded, both are heavy that.
So now that all of the core packs, injectors and wiring are on, I've moved on to removing all of the cooling system parts that will be replaced. So now everything is put back together. The only thing left to do is put the exhaust back on and the whole drivetrain can go back into the chassis. The process to put an engine back into one of these cars is pretty simple, to be fair, especially if you compare it to something older like a B8 or B7 RS4 or RS5. There's definitely a lot less coolers and hydraulic lines that need to be removed or put back on, and on these newer Audis you also don't need to remove the bumper or rad pack, so that saves a lot of time. Just in general, the B9 platform is a lot more mechanic friendly. In the future I will be recording the full process of removing and replacing the timing chains on a V8. Now that the engine has built up enough oil pressure, I can put the air filter in and we can start the engine for the first time. Now after starting the engine for the first time, I've plugged in VCDS and I'll be checking what fault codes are stored and I'll be clearing them. I'll also be resetting the service intervals and later I'll be checking some live data. Whilst the engine is running, I'm checking the face position of the camshaft adjusters. They're all reasonably close to the specified value, but I will be doing basic settings on the adjusters so that they will be brought closer to the tolerance. So that about does it for this video. I've done so far 15 miles. It's been running fine. Been checking the coolant, tracking's fine. There's no more knocking, there's no more engine lights or RPM limitations. There's only a volcano. Needs some washer fluid. But yeah, pretty common issue on these B9 S4s, S5s, RS4s, RS5s. Just anything with the 3 litre and 2.9 V6 petrol. So something to look out for, definitely. But hope you enjoyed. See you on the next one.